Let me just start off by saying I've been looking forward to and wanting to talk to you for quite some time. I love your work, my friend.
Thank you very much.
This is no exception. Just amazing. I walked out of the screening. They asked for my instant reaction. I said, eye-opening.
Oh, wow.
How much preparation, how do you get ready for a role like this? I know the director talked about the research he went through, but I'm just curious, you're playing a real person. How do you get ready for something like this?
I met with Dan. I don't know that I necessarily had to, but I in a way, I think I kind of did. It was really helpful to kind of know his mindset, but also his way of working on it was different. We're making a movie, so I didn't have to worry about doing an impersonation or impression of him. Scott was very clear that he didn't want that. With anybody that you play that is a real person in the world, you try to take details that open your imagination and disregard the things that don't. Dan has a really great sense of decorum with, as a Senate staffer, that he knows that there's a chain of command, and he's very faithful in the institutions, even now, in spite of the report that, this 7-year report that challenged, not only his moral compass within these institutions that he put so much faith in, but the country overall. And so that was helpful. Trying to read the report as much as I could, talking to Scott, who was, a fountain of information about this. So it was all kind of helpful. But at a certain point, you kind of put the facts out of the way and don't get too bogged down by them, because we're not playing facts. We have to play the scenes as scenes. So the theme of obsession was really an interesting one. Disillusioned by, as I was saying earlier, institutions that you believe in was an interesting, isolation, again, the sense of decorum. Those were more playable things that were in the script and less the facts.
Did he teach you the government speak? Because I'm going to tell you right now, if you ever run for office, I'm voting for you. Just the way that you handled yourself and the lingo that you were dropping. Did you have to learn some of that, the decorum?
Oh, yeah. And also because we were changing it, Scott was very adamant about not having anything, a line that you could throw a dart at that was wrong, or that couldn't be backed up by fact. There were definitely more salacious things that were in the report that he chose not to put in, which is a testament to his discipline. So, but then again, we had to shoot it in 26 days. So as much as I would have liked more time to really, a lot of it was changing on the fly. So it was a lot of, ingestion, regurgitation, and go on to the next scene. We kind of had to move at a pace when we were shooting it. But in a way, I don't know how you do a movie about obsession or, represent a high work ethic in a character without some sort of kind of, madness going on backstage, or to kind of replicate it in some way, which is the closest thing that we'll get. We don't have 7 years to get into a room, so we truncated it into a month.
I saw what happened to Telluride with Martin Scorsese.
Oh, yeah.
You really deserve that, and you're amazing.
Oh, no. I was blown away by that. I don't think I deserved that, but thank you for saying it.
Gentlemen, let me just start off by saying great work. Just a fantastic story, incredible story. Where do you start? I'll start with you. Where do you start to work on a film like this, to tell the story and to get it right? Tell me about the research process and everything you went through to get this going.
I first sort of became aware of the EIT program, the Enhanced Interrogation Program that the CIA had, from an article in Vanity Fair that talked about the two psychologists who were sort of the architects of the program. And I started doing work with a human rights investigator out of Harvard named Nathaniel Raymond, and I started speaking to military investigators and other people, Ali Soufan, and eventually I found myself coming back to the report itself repeatedly, and Dan's name is at the front of the report, and I called Senator Feinstein's office, and eventually they put us in touch. And when I heard Dan talk about his experience, and I began to appreciate the integrity and the thoughtfulness that went into the executive summary, I decided that not only did I want to tell the story of the program, but I wanted to tell the story of a person who really fought like hell against really huge odds to get this thing out in the world.
we all play the game, who do you want to play you in a movie? Did you ever think in a million years it would be Adam Driver? That's kind of cool, man.
Yeah, no, it's pretty special, and Adam does just such a fantastic job of conveying what it's like to be into an investigation over 7 years, right? You can see it in his eyes and his face throughout the film. We couldn't be more pleased.
I want to go back to that era when you were working on this. And it is depicted in the film, and it's depicted extremely raw and very real, but the question, it seemed like you would be genuinely afraid. How afraid were you at times?
Well, you have to be almost singularly focused at all times on one objective, and that's kind of where we were. It was really important to document what we were going through in these 6.3 million pages, and then we were focused on carrying out what the senators wanted, which was to get this pulled together and released in a format that protected national security but still told the story. So, we were singularly focused, relentless pursuit in sort of the same direction.
What was most important for you to get right, to portray?
Well, one of the things that I learned from, working on the script with Dan was that, there are a lot of things that are rumors and theories that surround the program that are even more salacious and horrifying than the things that are in the report. And they're very tempting, when you're making a movie to go for the thing that's extreme. But he and I had a number of conversations, and I wanted to stay within the boundaries of the work he had done, because that also is part of his story, and the discipline that it takes to not overreach and not get emotional in an effort to prove your point. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, when you're making a movie, but I began to realize that I could actually use that dramaturgically to build tension, that this was a guy who knew this greater truth, but yet had to stay within this box of decorum. And that became really the driving kind of principle of the piece.
It's good to see you again, and it's great to meet you.
Thank you.
Congratulations to you both on just amazing roles, just a fantastic film and a powerful story. A real eye-opener was my first reaction after I walked out of the screen. I was
Thanks
like,
very
wow,
much.
It's incredible. How do you decompress after a day of filming, playing these characters?
Ooh,
How about you?
That's a good question. It's a lot. It's a lot when you're confronted, and I think your impression of the film when you see it all put together is it's that download of information that has been out there but classified or tried to been buried or what have you. So day after day, I didn't have the schedule that Annette had or that Scott had, and I certainly didn't have the experience that Dan had, who actually went through all of this. So I kind of popped in and popped out. But it was interesting for me to come in and be like, where are we at in the story? What just happened? Oh God, okay. That was kind of the challenge for me, was to maintain where I was in the story, because obviously when you shoot, you kind of jump back and forth.
Right. Same question for you, though. How do you decompress after a day? Of course, you did an amazing portrayal of Senator Feinstein.
Oh, thanks.
I love her, by the way.
Thank you.
I really do. And so I was like, wow, this is great. But, how do you come down after, doing that all day?
Yeah, I do sort of need some complete downtime where, I might turn, especially if I'm away from home, just in a hotel, I'll just flip on the news. I'm kind of a news junkie. And have a glass of wine, have a bite. And on something like this, well, actually, I think most projects that I've been on, your days are really long. So you have to kind of take care of yourself in order to, be sharp. So, getting to sleep really quickly is actually really important, because you're usually up really early. For some reason, when we shoot movies, we start insanely early. And we've got to do something about that.
Work with Clint Eastwood. There you go.
Oh, I've heard that.
Yeah, you'll never have a call table before 10.
That's what I heard.
Yeah, it's
Now,
fantastic.
see, that's I
amazing.
want to go on to that one. They only give
Yeah.
me a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
So, they say, and John, we've talked about this before in other roles that you and I've talked about in other film projects. Every role kind of has an impact on an actor and actress when you walk away from it and you leave it. So my question to you both is, and we'll start with you, Annette. What impact did this have leave on you?
That's a great question, because I think you're right. I think they do have an impact. Well, One of the things that I've been thinking about is her personality, her particular personality. She's a measured politician. And in some ways, it's part of this story. Because I think that Dan Jones, who was the Senate staffer who really drove the report and writing it and making it happen, she was behind him and she was pushing him. But he was also trying to push her at times, and she would remind him, we have to stick with the facts. And so her demeanor is, I think, for her, authentic. And I think right now, especially with sort of television dominating our political discourse and the way people present themselves as being such a huge part of what gets across rather than the content. I mean, she is somebody who played by the rules, who has always, I think it's fair to say, played by the rules. And in this case, there was a very significant outcome. Nobody went to jail after this torture report came out, and of course it's only a summary of a much larger, it's a 7,000-page report that Dan was allowed to do a 500-page summary of, which was then released. But a lot of good came from it, and she is not a grandstander, and that gives me hope. Gives me hope that the right thing can happen, and it did. She and Senator Feinstein, Senator McCain passed a bill reaffirming the fact that we as Americans do not torture. It is against the law, and that if anybody is captured in the battlefield, the International Red Cross must be allowed in. So that was all reaffirmed from this, and it was a lot of people that worked on it, and she was just one of them. But I think that gives me hope. So I think that it's left me with a greater sense of faith, especially right now when things are so unstable politically.